Welcome to Chapter 4, Market Equilibrium. The market equilibrium is where supply meets demand. Demand and supply come together in a market. Why a market? Markets are going to help us organize things. It will answer the question of what gets produced and how much gets produced, and who's doing it, and who's receiving it, and at what price does all this go down. Although we're going to spend a lot of time discussing how markets help allocate our scarce resources, it would be a good reminder that this is not the only way in society that we do this. For instance, we often decide who gets what by a community council together as neighbors, or we use a local or federal government to collect taxes and produce public goods, such as education or the military. And then finally, especially inside of a family, people decide who gets what, who cleans the dishes, how do we allocate the budget, and whose turn is it to play Zelda tonight? Thinking about a market can help us with all these decisions, but it's not the only way to do it. Markets bring together two competing forces. The buyers want low prices, and the sellers, they like high prices. Both are trying to maximize their individual economic surplus. It's very important to note that our little model of the market right now is assuming equal bargaining power. There are many buyers, many sellers, and perfect competition all around. Now, often it's the case this is not true. If you have a monopoly, for instance, the monopolist has most of the bargaining power. And of course, economists study this. Most famously, when you think of bargaining, you think of labor contracts. For centuries, the labor market has been characterized by unequal bargaining power, thus requiring greater labor protection laws, such as a 40-hour work week and minimum wage and safety standards, and other negotiation tools such as collective bargaining and unions. But for a lot of things like a couch, there's lots of sellers, lots of buyers. It's relatively competitive. When buyers and sellers come together, they'll find an equilibrium. This is the point where there is no tendency to change. These opposing forces are in balance. The supply side and demand side will negotiate on a price until quantity supplied is equal to quantity demanded. We describe this as the market clearing. There's no excess surplus, and there's no scarce shortages. And how do they negotiate? Through prices. Prices are information. When the price is real high, sellers will be happy and they'll increase their quantity supply. But on the other hand, consumers aren't having it. They will reduce their quantity demanded. Likewise, when the price is too low, many sellers won't be able to cover their costs and they'll pull out of the market, reducing quantity supplied. But consumers love low prices. They'll show up in droves. And they'll keep doing this imbalance of the price being too high or the price being too low until we eventually arrive at an equilibrium. Let's put them together on the graph. Vertical axis is price and horizontal axis is quantity. Notice I said quantity in general because we're going to have both quantity demanded as well as quantity supply on that horizontal axis. Here's the downward sloping demand curve and the upward sloping supply curve. Where they meet in the middle is the equilibrium price and quantity. And that's a gold star. Well, what if we're not at that price? Let's walk through the story. The old price is high. At that level, quantity demanded is low and quantity supplied is higher. The difference between this is a surplus. The store shelves are full of stuff and they're not selling. Inventory is overflowing. And what do you do when you're a firm with too much stuff to sell? You put it on clearance and lower the price. As the price falls, quantity demanded will increase and quantity supply will fall until we arrive at the new equilibrium. Let's walk through this with some numbers. We're looking at a market schedule for a corduroy structured beanbag chair. You can go down to your local Walmart or Target and get something similar. Let's trace out the demand curve. At $95, consumers only want 4, and at $65, 7 consumers show up to the store. In this case, everything is aligned. Likewise, on the supply side, at $95, they are very happy to supply it up to 10, but at $65, they'll only want to supply 4. Each row in this table will tell us if there's a surplus or a shortage. Quantity demanded minus quantity supply, -6, -3, 0, +3. At $85, we have a surplus of 3 unsold beanbag chairs. And at $65, we have a shortage of 3 people wanting chairs, but the store not having any. In either of those situations, there is an incentive to change the price. When there's a surplus, firms will want to lower the price. When there's a shortage, stores are empty. Firms will want to raise the price. And following these price changes, consumers will change their behavior until we arrive at a new equilibrium where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. Pink corduroy for life. Now let's ask a philosophical question. Do market prices reflect social value? In society, we use a market to help distribute the scarce resource, who gets the thing and who doesn't. But does the ultimate price tell us something about how we humans morally value it? To see what I mean here, take a glass of water. What's the market price for clean tap water? Basically zero or near zero. You think someone's got to pay the water bill. Now, what about the market for diamond rings? Are rings more valuable than water? Clearly not. You die if you don't have water. You can live a whole fulfilling life without a diamond ring. But of course, they're very nice and very beautiful. And beauty matters, but everyone can recognize it's on a lower value ranking than water, the stuff of life. So what's going on? Water is abundant. Even though we value it a whole lot, there's just a whole lot of it. And we can see that in the supply and demand. It's very easy for firms to supply it, and therefore they do for very little price. Many establishments will just have a drinking fountain for free. But what do we see with this demand curve? Consumers are basically going to buy the water no matter what. But because water is fairly competitive and very abundant and relatively cheap to supply, the price gets knocked down close to zero, but consumers receive tremendous benefit. This gap between the demand curve and the supply curve, and here we can extend that demand curve all the way up, we call this economic surplus consumer surplus. The value's there, it's just above the market price. All that benefit is going towards the end consumer. Comparing this with diamonds, they're much more scarce. Producers have to incur a lot of cost to provide it, hence a very steep supply curve. And while demanders like it, they certainly like it less than they do water. In the end, the market price for diamonds is higher than the market price for water, but water brings more consumer economic surplus than diamonds do.